Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in person and online. We're so happy to have you here for our program of Getting into the Zone, getting ready for the holiday through different lenses, trying to understand and to see what the holiday is supposed to mean to you and me, and what we're supposed to gain from this holiday as we go into it. And of course, the learning for this entire week, all the classes that we've done are dedicated by the Daniel S. Loeb Torah Center Gold donor Jean-Luc Berebi for the blessing of his wife Miriam Bat Yudit and their children Noah, Liat, and Eyal, and for the refuah shlema of Avraham ben Malka Be'ezrat Hashem. Tonight's program and all of the refreshments and the food downstairs are complimentary. We're asking if anyone would like to make a donation towards the Torah Center to please to see Jessica or myself afterwards and let us know. However much you'd like to give is up to you. Hashem should bless you all in helping us disseminate such beautiful Torah to all of Am Yisrael around the globe. Let's begin. The Gemara tells us a very interesting line. Hakoreh et ha-Megillah lemafreya. Someone who reads the Megillah backwards, eno yatsa, has not fulfilled his obligation. Now, my friends, that's a very strange thing to point out. Why would someone be reading the Megillah backwards? I never saw that it says if someone read this backwards, someone read that backwards. If someone shakes the lulav upside down, we don't usually encounter these things. Why would the Mishnah, why would the Gemara bring up such a strange case? And in fact, as well, one should ask, why is it that the Megillah read backwards is not fulfilled? At the end of the day, I read all the words. What difference does it make? There's a fascinating insight into this that's brought by the Sefer Ma'ar Chelev, and it is that which I'd like to share with you tonight in understanding this concept. So let me read to you, if I can, a very powerful sentence in the Megillah, and we'll try and analyze this sentence and try and understand what it means, and hopefully through that, understand why we're talking about reading the Megillah backwards. The Gemara says, on this point, it tells us that in the Megillah, we read that it's called Purim, the holiday, Al Shem Hapur. It's called lots because of the lot. It's called lots because of the lot. Anyone who's paying attention should ask the most obvious question. If you're calling Purim because of Pur, what should you have called Purim? Pur, not Purim. Purim means lots, plural. So what are these plural lots that we're talking about? So let me read you the words of the Midrash. And I think that you'll begin to see a larger pattern that is emerging here. The Midrash says as follows. First, the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Astrologos Gadol haya Haman. He was a massive astrologer. V'katav igeret pitkin. He wrote many different lots. V'hipil guralot, and he did many different lotteries, if you will, to know ben yom liyom uben mazal lemazal, which day would be the best day, which mazal, which sign would be the best sign to do it under, ben chodesh lechodesh, which month would be the best day, would be the best month. And on each one, he tried to understand. And then he asked, afterwards, he came with the answer to these lots. He then decided to put out that it was going to be on this day, on this month, and that was when we were going to kill the Jews. Most people know about those lots, but not everybody knows about the second part of this. And that is, the second part of this is that the Chachamim tell us that Haman experienced a very strange revelation. Every time he chose a day, he experienced his version of a bat kol, a heavenly voice explaining to him why that day was a terrible idea. On this day, you know what happened on this day? You know what the Jewish people did on this day? You want to pick this month? You know which mitzvah is associated with this month? Can't choose this month. Can't choose this month. In fact, Haman did not effectively create a lottery which allowed him to choose the day. It turned out that Haman's lottery was a choice, a exercise in figuring out all of the terrible days, all of the worst months. And in fact, he was left with a process of elimination that eventually led him to this day, the day of Purim. Now, my friends, the reason why I think this is so important really comes from the next midrash. I've heard all of this before, but what I learned this year that was new was this following expression. The Yalkut says that not only did he throw or cast lots to figure out which day, which month, which mazal, he also threw lots kidei livchor et ha'etz, to choose the tree. Which tree should he use to build this tree, this etz erez, this cedar tree? This man, you know when you say someone leaves nothing to chance? Haman took the exact opposite approach. He was trying his hardest to leave everything to chance, to not leave anything to logic, not leave anything to preparation. What day does it happen to fall out? What month? What mazal? Which word should I use? It's wild. What is going on with this man? My friends, I'd like to share with you what I think emerges from these midrashim in teaching us what is essentially the point of the entire Purim. Purim was about casting a lot. And that seems like a strange way to call this incredible holiday. But if you understand it properly, you'll realize that that is the exact point of the whole holiday. It's not a detail in the story. That is the story. If I had to express this, if I had to try and explain what this means, I'd like to take the thing that we started with. You read the Megillah lemafreya backwards, lo yatsa. You know who reads things backwards? Those annoying people we all have in our lives. You ever have someone come to you and tell you, you know, you behaved really not nice to me, you were very insensitive, and you're like, what? I was insensitive to you? Like, you literally humiliated me, you screamed at me, and then when I said it wasn't my fault, now you're yelling at me for saying it wasn't my fault? What is that person doing? He is koreh Megillah lemafreya. He's reading the story backwards. He's not seeing the cause and effect, but rather, first he's looking at the effect, then trying to draw some line to a cause that he believes is connected to that effect. It is only when a person sees the story unfolding in its proper manner that they're able to draw the lines between the dots and see what's being said. My friends, that's why you can't read the Megillah backwards. Haman asks himself a very powerful question. He wants to know one thing. These Jews, they can always figure out what to do in any given situation. Why? Because by looking at the way that that thing happened, they're able to intuit, to understand, to realize in God's message why this happened. And why did it happen in this way? And how come this was the way it unfolded? It must be because of this sin, because of this thing. Haman says, but if I randomize completely this story, then there will be no lessons to learn. Then there will be no line to draw. And then the Jews won't be able to figure out what to do to overcome my plot, my plan. I'll never forget once I was in the airport and I was walking and there was a woman actually, sitting there, a TSA agent. And she's got an iPad and it literally says on the iPad, randomizer. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what the randomizer is. And as each person walked up to the front, she clicked on the screen and the randomizer just pointed that you would go this way or this way or this way or this way. There's 2 aisles. I kind of feel like you don't need an iPad for that. I kind of feel like you could have just said, you there, you there, you there, you there, you there. You can make it random. Now, I understand that in the litigious nature of America, You send a Jew right, and he sues you. You send an African-American left, and he sues you. And everyone is suing you because what do you think? How come you decided it was intentional? So they have to have a randomizer. I understand. But the point, never mind, is the same. The randomizer makes it that there are no lessons to learn. My friends, when our eyes are open, and when things are not given to chance, then suddenly we find incredible meaning in every single thing that happens to us in our lives. There was a fellow, his name was Raz, young boy. His father had just bought a car in Israel, and cars in Israel are far more expensive, number one. And number two, you can't lease them. I don't know why there's no leasing in Israel. But either way, his father's got this really expensive car. He's got it for a few days. He asks permission, can he borrow the car? Father says yes. He starts driving the car. He's, and he's feeling great. He gets on the bridge. As he's driving on the bridge, all of a sudden the car kind of drives a little bit too close to the wall, and he gets a scratch across the whole side of the car. He feels terrible. He doesn't know what to do. He's flipping out. He gets to Tel Aviv, or wherever it was that he was going to from Jerusalem. He parks the car in a parking garage, and he's flipping out. He knows that that's where the car is supposed to sit until his father comes to Tel Aviv to pick it up, but he doesn't know how to say it to his father. He doesn't know how he's going to let him know that his brand new car is scratched front to back. This boy goes to the nearest holy place he can find, which might be far if you're in Tel Aviv. And he sits and he prays and he says Tehillim and he asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please Hashem. He says, my father's such a good man. He's waited his whole life to buy something nice for himself. He finally got something nice. I was the idiot. I was the fool. I was the one that wasn't careful. Hazid, he should have this problem with his car. It's not fair. I can't pay for it. Please Hashem, you need to do something. Anyway, his friend's sitting right next to him, the one that was in the car. And he says, look, I see you praying over here. He says, but what's God going to do? Does God do body work? Right? Does he have an auto shop? I mean, what is God going to do? And he even starts pulling out the religious stuff on him. He's like, you can't pray for a miracle. Anyway, okay, can't pray for a miracle. What's he going to do? But the boy is praying his heart out. And he feels in his heart that it's not right that this should happen to his father. And even though it's his fault, he promises Hashem he's never going to drive that way again. He promises he's going to, keep Shabbat and learn Torah and give tzedakah and do all the good things. But please Hashem, he says, solve this problem. I don't know what to do. Friend is laughing at him, laughing. They get back home, and all of a sudden, when he's sitting at home with his father, before his father could ask him about the trip, the phone rings. And a person calls and says, is this Mr. whatever the father's name is? He says, yes. He says, I have terrible news. What's the news? He says, unfortunately, I regret to let you know that there's bad news and good news. I'll give you the bad news first. He says, there was a rocket that was fired into Eretz Israel. It landed on a parking garage. It blew the place to smithereens. And we were able to find the license plate of your car. But the good news is that there's obviously a fund that will refund, of everyone's car, depending on how new it was. And since your car was brand new, you're going to be refunded the exact amount of a new car. And I'm reading this story to myself, and I can't even believe what I'm seeing. One of the challenges when a person is thinking about how God runs the world is that we try and limit God by thinking about God through our eyes. Where is God going to find the shidduch for me? If I'm this old, or I have this problem, or I have this, I can't. Where's the solution going to come from in my parnasah? There does not exist a medicine for this sickness. What is God going to do for me? But in our tefillah, we say that not only does God bring refu'ah, but God is boreh refu'ot. He creates medicines. He gives things to you that don't yet exist. So God was not done with his creative juices at the end of 7 days. God figures out all the time how to create new things. And even though Raz has no idea how God's going to fix this, God's got a way. And God's way doesn't look often the way you would have thought it would look. A random missile falls on a random building, does some random damage to a random car of a random young boy who's been praying to God nonstop to solve this problem with his friend making fun of him. How's God going to fix your scratched car? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to drive home this point about Purim in one way more than any other point. Haman's game with Purim was in ridding God from the story. And it is a fitting tribute that in writing the Megillah, we actually give a nod to Haman. And we rid God, the story of God. And you can't find his name anywhere in the Megillah. But why would we do that? And the answer is, because in a person's life, that is also our lived experience. There are moments in marriages and relationships and businesses, in friendships, in countries, where you cannot find God's name. And the Megillah is encouraging us. I know you can't find the name of God, but can you find order in this chaos? Can you find two dots and draw the line between them? Because if you can do that, then you don't need God's name. The challenge often is that in our experience, we don't have scenario number 1, scenario number 2, scenario number 3, scenario number 4. You know what we have? We have a bunch of different things mishkabobbled together. You can't tell where one starts and where one ends. You have no way of being able to link this in order to link that. And then you lose God from the story, from your story, from our story. That is the importance of reading the Megillah in its seder, in its order. To be able to create that order, to see, to sense that order. I'll never forget a line that I read in the Sefer of Rav Gamliel Rabinovich. He says that what we're being asked to do in this Megillah, in this idea of reading the Megillah, is not just to read the Megillah in order, but that every Jew has an obligation to be able to read their own Megillah, to be able to weed out the story, the parts that are inconsequential. We've all got that friend that when they tell stories, tells it so long that you lose the point. I'm sorry if that landed, and I'm sorry if that was you. But the job in telling a story is being able to pick out those parts, to notice when those things are happening. And it happens in hilarious ways. There was a young man whose name was Jankelowitz, family Jankelowitz in Israel. And the guy was struggling to get his kid into school. In Israel, getting kids into school is harder than getting kids into Harvard. Harder than getting kids into Yale, if you would want to do that anymore. A good yeshiva in Israel, forget about it. You should just know, it's just so you understand the level. There was a challenge at the time with Ashkenazi yeshivot that Sephardi's were trying to get in. They would write on the intake form, what is your name? And underneath that, there would be another line that would say, what is your previous name? Because people were changing their names from Farhi to Farchowitz, like you understand. So they would write, what's your previous name? Could you provide documentation for the previous name? So people, what did they do? You can't fool an Israeli. They just changed their name twice. They changed it from Farhi to Farchowitz, and then from Farchowitz to Farchberg. That is a terrible example of changing your name to be more Ashkenaz. Farchberg is going to get you caught 100% of the time. So he calls the school, and he makes an appointment to speak to the principal of the school. And he's shaking. And everyone else that gets into the school, you have what they call in Hebrew, vitamin P. Protectia. I see he knows it. You got to know someone who knows someone. And if you don't know someone who knows someone, your chances of getting in are 0. He doesn't know anybody. Young guy, not from the neighborhood, but his kids are in a school and they're getting influenced in a terrible way. He's got to pull the kids out. He's got no answer. He's got no option. So he pulls the kids out because he sees his kids are getting ruined in this other school. He goes to the kever of the great tzaddikim and he prays to Hashem and he asks God, please, 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 please. When he picks up the phone, he says, hello, yeah. He says, what's your name? My name is Jankelowitz. He says, okay. He says, what would you like? He says, I'm trying to get my 3 kids into school. Getting 1 kid into school is a miracle. Getting 3 kids into school, that's just greedy. Really, he says, you want 3 kids into the school? He says, yes. He says, what grades are they in? 5th grade and 6th grade and 3rd grade. He says, oh, fantastic. He goes, no problem. So send them. Your 5th grader will be with Rabbi Cohen. Your 6th grader will be Rabbi Levi. Your this one will be Rabbi Israel. Whatever it is. The guy's like, what? Of course, he doesn't want to say anything, right? Doesn't want to yell, doesn't want to scream, doesn't want to ask any questions. He says, thank you so much. Pretends like it's normal, that's how you get into a school. There's no interview. They don't have to check you out. Nothing. Brilliant. Hangs up the phone. He's dancing, he's singing, he's telling his wife, you see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu figures out ways. Boreh refuot. I prayed, and then this happened. The guy, I don't know. I had obviously the charm to be able to get this through. The kids joined the school. 1 week later, the principal gets a phone call. He says, hello. He says, hello, this is Mr. Jankelowitz. He says, yes, how can I help you? He says, I'd like to send my 3 kids to the school. He says, I'm sorry, we arranged this last week. He goes, what do you mean we arranged it last week? Listen to what happened. The biggest donor of the school called it a personal favor for a family member whose name was Mr. Jankelowitz. This man was just going to call the school and they were just going to take the kids and they were going to find the place for them no matter what. Or he was taking away his donations from the school. What did the school do? Without any questions, they took the kids in. And then 1 week later, will the real Mr. Jankelowitz please stand up? They're not going to throw the kids out. So, of course, suddenly the school found that they had room for 3 more children. My friends, I always wondered about this story. Perhaps we too can turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask this question. Esav says, Habracha achat lecha avi. God, don't you have space for 1 more blessing? You bless the other kid. Don't you have space for 1 more blessing for me? Now, normally you think, if I win, then he loses. But for God, it doesn't have to work that way. There could be 2 Jankelewitzes in the same school. They could be fighting for 1 spot, and suddenly there'll be 2 spots. You don't know how you're going to solve the problem with the car, and a missile will fall from the sky and blow it to smithereens. And suddenly, you'll be able to have what you want. You know what the difference is between this guy and most people? Most people see an impossible situation and they just don't pray. And they just don't try. And they give up before they even started. Take a minute and go back and review the story Al Pi HaSeder. No Jew should even exist today. We should not be successful today. We are immigrants like all the other immigrants that came to this country. How are we not still on the streets, fighting in the ways that other communities are? How are we rising to the top everywhere we go? And when you see that Jews are impossible here, 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 and here, ask yourself, God, did you run out of impossible just when I needed it? Isn't that fascinating? That's what it means to read the story Al Pi HaSeder. May God bless us to read the story of the Jewish people in order. May God bless us to see our stories being not just seder, but misuda, taken care of by a Borei Olam that knows how to create the most unlikely outcomes and make it look easy, with the one condition being that you are willing to find him in a place where you cannot see his name. Chazak u'baruch.